Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this big boy right here. This is the Serge Panchenko Serge Knives Trisect. Oh boy, we got ourselves a trisector going on. That doesn't even make sense. Anyways, first off though, in the name of full disclosure, I do want to let you know that Serge Panchenko, Serge Knives, sent this guy along. Reached out to me sometime back, said, hey Nick, you want to check out some of the new stuff I got coming out? I said, yes, absolutely. But I told him, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk. He did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my absolute best not to let any of this affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's go on ahead and do some size comparison, in which we're going to find out that this thing is pretty freaking big. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2, and we see pretty freaking big. Here it is against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, and we see right here, pretty freaking big. In terms of actual sharpened blade length, we're actually not that far off the PM2, but nonetheless, and then here it is against the Spyderco Delica, which will also show us that this is pretty freaking big. This is a big old knife, right? It is not necessarily a super thick knife, actually. I should probably show that off directly, right? If we put this guy up next to the Spyderco Para 3, Para 2, that is, what we're going to see is it's about the same thickness as it, right? It's just a particularly large knife, particularly on this dimension here. So it's a big one, but it's not, completely out of line, and it's not, oh my god, thick, heavy, overbuilt, that kind of thing. So there you go. Next thing, who the heck is Serge? Well, Serge Panchenko is a very well-known designer in the knife game. He has been in the game for a long time, and he's made a bunch of other stuff, some of which I've reviewed on the channel before. This is one of his slip joints, as well as he is a watch designer. So you get the Serge watch. This is the Model 3 at the moment on my wrist, but nonetheless, Serge is a pretty well-known person in the knife community. He has been around forever, he's been doing cool stuff for a while, and this is one of his latest versions. Now, one thing to note, though, is that this is a production knife. This is a factory knife that's being made by Bestech, which is a company out of China. They do very, very good work, mind you, but it is, that's who's building it. And the price on this guy, just to get it out there at the very start, is $400. So this is not a particularly cheap pocket knife over here. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, the clip on this guy is actually pretty well done. What we have here is a clip that is milled, right? This is milled of one solid chunk of metal here. We have a area here where it kind of rounds over. We have this little guy, which gives you plenty of ramp there. This is quite large enough to go under any material in the pocket, but it is also nice and wide, which means that ergonomically it feels pretty solid. And it's got this little hole in it, which is fine, right? It works well. But it is a nice clip, and it actually leads to a very good carry, right? Meaning that this guy, despite being gigantic at the top of the pocket there, will actually tend to curl off to the back side of your pocket if you're carrying it in the right side. That is a beautiful thing in and of itself, right? It's a good clip design, and it means that this knife will not ever carry subtly, and it will always carry big, especially because of this wide part here at the top, but it is going to carry a little deeper than some other options, so that's a good thing. Next thing, the inlay work on this is quite good. What we have here is a titanium, and this is a titanium that has some DLC, and then it is stonewashed, and then we also have a carbon fiber inlay that we can see sitting on top of it there. This is carbon fiber on top of your thigh, and that came out really well. It's well done. It's not like the seamless kind of inlays that some folks go for, but it doesn't have to be, right? It's well done, and it looks well designed, and it matches, the inlay pattern matches a lot of this. Being completely honest with you, I probably had this for 2 or 3 days before I realized that was an inlay, right? Because, it looks a lot like the stonewashed tie. And that's a good sign to me, at least. It feels very seamless. It feels like a necessary part of the knife. And so that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, this does have some internal pocketing. If we take a look here, can we see it? Yeah, we can see it just barely in there, right inside here, and then here. We can also see on the other side. And this makes it a little bit lighter than it would have otherwise been. I'm not sitting here saying it's a light knife. I'm going to go ahead and put this on there. We are at 5.5 ounces for about, there, a little over 3.75 inches, actually a little under 3.75 inches worth of blade length, depending on how the cop measures and how much they like you and whatnot. But nonetheless, it's a heavy knife, but he has done some work very much to try and reduce that heaviness. And actually, one of the odd things about it is that the balance is right where you want it to be. If I kind of balance this here, That's about where one would hope. And so I think that pocketing is probably less there to make the knife light and more there to make the knife just balance right. And I think that's a really nice thing. And the ergonomics on this knife are actually surprisingly good. In my relatively small hands, this thing works pretty well with a nice area here to grip. With chamfers where you need chamfered, it's quite good ergonomically, even though on the surface it looks like it should just be like, ew, no. That is definitely a nice thing that he's done there. I'll also say the lock bar access is amazing on this because this whole area right here is lock bar. You just put your thumb here and you press. That gives you lots and lots of leverage. You might be thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of lock bar. Could you accidentally overstress it with that much leverage? Well, no, because you have a lock bar stop right here. You have an over travel stop hiding right there underneath. Hiding. Oh, don't know where that came from. But anyways, hiding under the carbon fiber. This prevents you from pressing this lock bar too far over and outbending it. So that's a beautiful thing too. It has a nice solid action, right? If I flick this guy out, which is how I normally deploy it, it deploys quite reliably. You can also two-hand it. I imagine you could maybe, if you had the right hands, front flip it. Yeah, I just pulled it off. My hands are not quite large enough for it, but it is, yeah, holy crap, I did it. It is technically a front flipper. But the action on it is well done. The detent is dialed in. The knife itself is reasonably smooth. Mind you, anything falls shut when the blade's this damn big. But nonetheless, it is definitely, the action on it is good to go. Finishing is also pretty good. We have carbon fiber in the middle here, although some of the other ones, the ones I'm seeing for sale online, time of review, are actually flame titanium. Nonetheless, see some carbon fiber in the inlays here on this model. You see the titanium here, which has been DLC'd and then stonewashed. And then the pivot itself actually has a very nice finish to it, right? It gives a little bit of reflectivity there. The hardware looks good on it overall. Maybe DLC hardware might suit this better, but honestly, I don't know. It matches the blade and whatnot. Who knows? But either way, it's well finished. There's no complaint there. Honestly, it's a Bestech, right? And Bestech tends to make very nice designs well, right? They'll also make very bad designs well, but nonetheless, this is a good design, right? Talk about that later. But the blade on this guy is also nice. We are looking at M390. There is no hardness given, which is always a little bit concerning, but it performs as I would hope it to perform, generally speaking. And it comes down to actually a surprisingly thin edge for the size of this big beefy thing, right? So I'm pretty okay with that. It's not the thinnest edge ever. This might not be your choice for cutting tomatoes in the kitchen, although getting down onto a cutting board ain't so straightforward. But at the same time, it comes down to a nice edge, and it is a fine little blade for cutting. Next thing, this is a super conscientious design. Serge has been in the game for a while, right? Folks in the knife community he has been in the knife game way longer than I have. He's a very, very good designer, and you can kind of tell that, right? This is the opposite of the kind of sloppy design that I very, very often see in, folks having their knives made overseas these days, right? He is a designer who does solid work, and he thinks about the details. He thinks about over-travel stops, for instance, thinks about clip angles, thinks about the fact that all of these the balance issues, right? Lock bar access. This is a knife that is well thought through. It is a very conscientious design, and, I gotta say, I appreciate that about Serge. This is one of the reasons why I like his work so damn much. He's a good designer. He's put in the thought, and that's an absolutely beautiful thing. So to me, all of that is the good, is that it is a super conscientious design. It's got a nice blade, nice finishing, good solid action, surprisingly good ergonomics, a great lock bar access, some internal pocketing, good inlay work, and a good clip design. On the great side, what I'm going to go ahead and put here is actually the fact that this is Serge. Like, not the fact that it is by him, that's not itself great, but the fact that you look at this for maybe a quarter of a second, you go like, oh, Serge, right? And not even just because he's got his logo here. I could cover this up, and I imagine most knife people would look at that and go, oh, Serge, right? Because he has a unique look, right? There are relatively few designers out there who are unmistakable in their style, right? Where you look at their stuff, you're like, oh, yeah, that's them. Right? Where it's not even a question, it's not even a contest, it's just like, oh yeah, that's Serge, right? You could take this off the knife, and I would tell you in a heartbeat that this is a Serge Panchenko design, even though it is very different than a lot of his stuff. His stuff tends to be much smaller than this. This is not small, right? This is an actually relatively unique knife, and I know a lot of people are bothered. Relatively unique? That's a contradiction. I don't care. Let me know in the comments down. Anyways, but this is a knife that is off the beaten path relative to a lot of what we see. Sure, there are other cleavers out there. Sure, Well, actually, this handle's just plain freaking weird. Let's just be real here, but this feels different. Feels unique, and it feels Serge. And so for me, the fact that this knife doesn't feel like anything else is a big merit for it, right? Because, well, it means you can't get it anywhere else. And that's one of the things that'll help to justify a higher price tag like this guy has. So, to me, all of that is the great, is that it's a pretty damn unique-looking knife, and from a designer who really does have a strong design DNA that I think a lot of people love. On the bad side, to start with, there is one little corner that could use rounded. That's this little guy right here. Not the end of the world, and it's chamfered on one side, but could use a chamfer on the other side. Not a big deal, but it's a thing. I'm also not a huge fan of the external lock bar relief here. Would have preferred that is on the inside of the knife instead, just because it would leave this as a smoother and more symmetrical knife, rather than having this cut out there. Not a big deal at all. It's just me complaining, but at this kind of price point, I get to complain a little bit. Next thing, the lunchroom acceptance factor of this is going to be weird, right? This is a statement piece. You take this out of your pocket, you are making a statement. I'm not 100% sure what that statement is, but I do know that it's relatively loud, right? This is a piece that people, Irma from accounting is going to look at that and go, what are you? Who sent you? Right? Maybe not diving under the table, because it's not that kind of thing, but also it's certainly weird. So you're going to want to keep that in mind, right? This is a knife that is way off the beaten path, and for a lot of people, that's going to be part of the joy, right? They take this out of their pocket to open a salad, they're going to be smiling because everybody else is going to be staring, right? It is a very unusual pocket knife in that sense, and I think that's a beautiful thing, but for some people, it could actually be a bit of a trouble, and certainly at this size, it could be concerning in some places, legally as well as just in terms of scared people. Next thing, speaking of the size, this guy is huge. It's not a problem that it's huge per se, right? That's its own thing. And for some people, they've been looking for a larger knife from Serge for a while, but still at the same time, dude, holy cow, this is a big one, right? And that's part of the joy for many, but it could be a deal breaker for others. But more importantly, and I think actually relevant on the bad side, this is very large in the pocket, right? On your average pocket knife, the part of the knife that is closest to your pocket tends to be relatively thin, right? This allows the knife to only take up a very small portion of the as you're reaching your hand past into your pocket there. You want it, well, maybe this hand instead properly, but nonetheless, you want it to not take up a lot of the space that you have at the top of the pocket. This guy is the opposite of that, right? This has this really big, wide area right at the top of the pocket there. That is a bunch. That is, it is solidly taken up, easily 2 inches at the top of your pocket there. If you got big old pockets, it's not a problem, but it could actually be a concern for some. So you want to keep that in mind, and that is the downside of having these harpoon style or cleaver, or in this case, maybe it's a cleave boon look, I don't know. But at a certain point, it's big at the top of the pocket. That could be a downside for you. Then finally, on the bad side, this is very pricey, right? $400 is a lot of money for an overseas-made frame lock these days. That is also what a lot of overseas-made frame locks are costing these days, but that remains a lot of money for it, right? And even with a unique design, for a lot of people, that's going to be a deal breaker, and for a lot of people, it may struggle to justify that price. So that's at least to me, that's very clearly the worst part of the knife. The knife is very, very good in most respects, but $400 is a lot of money. So to me, all that's the bad, is that it is pricey, it is very big at the top of the pocket, it's pretty big generally, the lunchroom acceptance factor is, gonna be interesting. The external lock bar relief isn't an aesthetic choice I love, that it does need one little corner broken right there. Nothing ugly here, although for some people they're not gonna love this design, obviously, but I think, ugly for me is a slightly different kind of situation. And my final conclusion here is that this is a pretty neat knife, right? It's got a good clip, good inlays, some internal pocketing, weirdly good ergos, good lock bar access, smooth, solid action, with nice finishing, a nice blade, a smart overall design, and a very unique and very Serge look. Yeah, it's got some details that could be improved. It's a little loud in the lunchroom, and not just in the click, click, click opening it sense. It's massive in the pocket as well as everywhere else, and it's very, very pricey. And honestly, for me, the price is kind of the problem, right? It is well done. It's well made. And Serge is a designer who is really actually good enough at his craft to ask $400 in such a way that I raise my eyebrow and go, that's a little high, rather than just laughing, right? There are a lot of new makers who are coming into the scene with $400 best tax, and it's just like, no. Or, maybe, but still barely no, right? It's still, even for Serge, though, getting harder and harder and harder, charge that kind of money for an overseas-made frame lock in 2023. The market is saturated with best deck frame locks. And even, for $400, you were up against the best of the best in terms of large production knife making made anywhere in the world, right? It is many nice things, but it is not value, right? And so this isn't one of those recommendations where it's like, you should buy one of these no matter what. Like, no, that's absolutely not the case, right? In fact, I cannot imagine a random person coming up to me for a recommendation, me talking, sitting down with him, and by the way, this doesn't happen anyways, but still, I can't imagine saying to that person, yeah, Serge Trisect, 100%. Not because it's a bad knife in any way, but it's just a little bit weird for your average jackass, right? That's not to say that some random person couldn't love and enjoy and use this for the rest of their days. This will easily be a bunch of people's favorite knife, I imagine. But it's more to say that your average jackass on the street might not just, get it, or might find the size in the pocket to be a little bit much, and would certainly find the price to be a little bit much, but either way, I don't know that this is a recommend it to everybody knife. And so the value ain't great, and it's not a knife I can think of, a person who this is for. But none of that actually matters, because the person this is aimed at is going to see the price as a speed bump, not a wall. And the fact that it's big, weird, and shouty is exactly why they're buying it. This is a collector knife, through and through. This is aimed precisely at people who love Serge's work. Maybe it's their first piece by Serge, maybe it's their 10th. But the buyer of this is buying it precisely because of the aesthetic, because of who Serge is and what he does. They are looking at this design and going, that's more of what I love from my favorite designer here, right? The details, including things like value and practicality, are a part of the package, but it's not the key element. And you might ask, if you're feeling a little bit meta at that moment, why bother reviewing it if it's just a collector piece? If you're saying all of these bad things don't count, what's the freaking point anymore? Well, that's a really good question there, meta viewer, but the thing is, I believe quite firmly that meant for collectors is not an excuse. There are absolutely designers who have as much fan loyalty, if not more, than Serge, right? And who take full advantage of that. They will sell half-baked but beautiful designs or cut corners in production because no one's going to really carry it. It's meant for my collectors, right? It's beautiful in the display shelf. It doesn't need to. And so even, for those kinds of people, they're not putting in the full effort. They've got their name, now they're going to skate. And so in those situations, and generally speaking, even if value isn't the question, and even if something's not something I'm going to send people to broadly, I still think it's important that when you see a collector piece like this that is very clearly aimed at the fan club, that is very clearly aimed at a particular kind of person who has a particular kind of taste, we should ask, did they do the work, right? Did they have it made as well as it should be? Is the design well done enough to be carryable and usable? Is it a good knife, or is it just a good Instagram photo? And again, it's weird that we're asking these questions these days, but I'm delighted to report that even though this is very much a collector's knife, and for many people, they didn't care and they bought one 10 minutes ago, Serge did put in the work, right? He has made this as carryable as an object shaped like this is ever going to be, right? And the details are absolutely there. The construction is good to go. It is a perfectly functional tool. It is not a knife I would carry, but that's more a fact about me, my pockets, my hands, and my life than it is about the Trisect here. So ultimately, you knew 20 minutes ago whether or not you were likely to buy this. Heck, the target market probably pre-ordered and bought it day one, right? But from my perspective, if you love the design, if you love the size, and if you're willing to pay that price, then you know what? It's well done. It's got to really tickle your buttons, so to speak, if you're a Serge person, and you might as well give this little guy a try. So hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.